Okay, let's get started. First of all, I just want to say good morning to everyone and welcome to the BGL Online Summit. This is a virtual event showcasing some of our RegTech 2025 sponsors. I'm Lily Williams, Partnerships Manager at BGL, and today's session, Make Technology Stick, How to Get Staff to Embrace New Apps, is co-hosted by our friends at Xero. I'm pleased to introduce today's presenter. We have Sarah Watts. Sarah is a seasoned change lead at Xero with over a decade of experience in managing change both internally and for Xero's partners. She has led the largest implementations of Xero's practice tools globally and brings a wealth of knowledge about driving change across organizations of all shapes and sizes. Before we get started with today's session, I'll just cover some of the general housekeeping. This webinar is recorded, so you will receive a copy of the recording at the end of the session, and we also post these onto our YouTube channel. The Q&A function is open, so any questions you have throughout the webinar, please pop them here, and we'll go through these questions towards the end of the webinar. Sarah, I will pass it over to you to kick things off.
Thank you, Lily. Let's see if I can get this right. Oh, apologies. Okay. Sorry. I do apologize. I'm just having some technical difficulties. This will be good, I promise. And get it to work. I don't know what suddenly changed. All right. Okay, are you able to see my screen?
Yep, I can now.
Yeah, it's really weird. Beautiful. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Apologies for that. Again, strong start. So today we're going to take a look at some really simple ways to get more out of your investment in change faster, keeping your people engaged and reducing downtime by getting them to embrace the apps and use them to their full potential. So making the technology stick. My name is Sarah Watts. I am a change lead at Xero. As Lily mentioned, I've been managing change now for 10 years. I'm a chartered accountant. I hold a graduate certificate in change management. I'm ProSci certified, and more recently, I got my graduate diploma in psychology. I am one of those weird sort of COVID cases where I was living in Melbourne when it all sort of came about 5 years ago. And I'm actually originally from WA. So I moved back to WA, and with the regional lockdowns, I actually moved back to our family farm. So I am coming to you today from regional Western Australia, a little town called Wandering. And I have advised everyone to keep chickens, pet lambs, all the rest of it away from me, so I can hopefully do this without too much distraction. It's also from this rather unusual workplace that I have managed the largest implementations of Xero's practice tools globally, so the likes of RSM Australia and also Grant Thornton. So while I work on these really large implementations now, I have worked on changes of all shapes and sizes throughout my career. And so the sort of stuff that I'm wanting to share with you today are probably the things that I take through every single implementation or change that I look at. Beautiful. So today we're going to start off by firstly taking a look at what change management is for those who are not familiar with the practice. We're then going to take a look at Xero's change experience framework. So this is a framework that was created in Xero for Xero, but we wanted to share it with you today. And then we're going to take a look at planning your change. This is where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck, is by being proactively prepared. Okay, so what is change management? Okie doke. So, to apologise, technical difficulties. My clicker's not working. So when we talk about change, unfortunately, just going out and announcing that there is a change does not mean that anything is in fact going to happen. So this is where change management comes into play. Change management is a structured, research-backed approach to ensuring that your employees are intrinsically motivated, they are capable and committed to adopting the necessary changes for your business to achieve your business outcomes or your business goals. The achievements of an organisation are the results of the combined effort of each individual. It is so important to understand that organisations don't change. It is the people within those organisations who do all the changing. At its core, change management is about taking each of those individuals, guiding them through their own individual journey of change. It's about changing their mindsets, their behaviours, equipping them with the skills, the knowledge, the support that they need to be able to embrace and sustain the change long term. Because at the end of the day, the faster each person embraces the change, the sooner you're going to see a return on your investment. And that's effectively what change management is all about. It's about getting a faster, larger return on your investment. Okay, so when it comes to planning the change, there is this really beautiful space between the decision being made to change and then the decision, then people actually finding out. So during this space, if we use it really well, we can design an experience that can have a really beautiful impact, and it will, so that we can smoothly roll out our change. I think the biggest question I often get here though is, how do you plan for something that you've never actually done before? And that's where Xero's change journey and change execution framework comes into play. Excuse me. So as I mentioned, this framework, this was designed internally by Xero's. It supported us in delivering change at scale and pace now for over 10 years. And my hope today is that you can take this away and use it in your own business. Okay, so the change journey and change execution framework is it's a tool that enables us to divide up the change into phases and how people experience it, so we can then plan for it. Now, just note there is a little disclaimer down the bottom there. Please just don't sell this. It's pretty much the disclaimer. It is our framework, but again, we want to make sure that you can use this internally yourselves. Okay, so change journey and change execution. So up the top, we've got our change journey. This is how people experience the change. Down the bottom, we then have how we manage the change. So meeting people where they're at. So when we first start out, people hear about the change, they need to mentally prepare for it. It's in this phase that people become quite instinctually, I want to say selfish, but it's more about self-preservation, right? They're going to have lots of questions about, how is this change going to impact me? Do I feel safe? Do I feel valued? Is there risk associated with this? So to meet them where they're at, we need to ensure people get clear on what the change means, why it's important, and what it looks like for them. And we do this by communicating and driving engagement. From here, we then look to physically prepare for the change. So if you're familiar with the ADKAR model as well at all, it's awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and then reinforcement. So when we're first starting off in mentally preparing, we're getting that awareness. for the need to change. We're building people's desire to want to change. When it comes to physically preparing for the change, we're looking at giving them knowledge, so the how they're going to change. So here we need to set people up with the right environment, conditions, skills, and tools for the change to occur. And we do that through education and enablement. And then our last phase is physically experiencing the change. So this is where we need to support and influence people to think and behave in alignment with the new environment to make the change normal and create new habits. And this is all about transition and integration into their ways of working. So it goes from being this new thing to being just business as usual. Often we can train people and then we walk out, but this last phase is the one that I see done probably most poorly. And it's the most important, right? Because here we're trying to actually get, people might have the knowledge to be able to do something, but we need to raise their ability to be able to do the change that we're asking from them. I know what it takes to run a marathon. It's a very different if you ask me to actually run the marathon, right? Like ability, knowledge, very different. So we're making sure that they're starting to use the new tools, and then when we talk about ADCAR, so ability and then reinforcement. So we need to make sure we have those reinforcement mechanisms wrapped around our people so that we're driving in the right direction. Underneath all of this, we have leadership. So your leaders are arguably your most critical players in a change. Okay, so this is because when people when people are asked to change, the first thing they do is they look to their leaders. In any time of uncertainty, they look to their leaders, and it's not just because they need like they need support. I mean, they do, but that's not the main. It's not the only reason. It's because just during times of uncertainty, they learn how they should react from their leaders. So a best way to explain it is through an example. It's like when you have someone who is really excited about tech. Okay, so they love tech, they're all about innovation. You will see those behavioral traits reflected in their people. But the same obviously goes if they're negative as well. So if you've got people who are they're not on board with the change, you're going to see that reflected in their people. If you've got someone who comes into work late, their people are going to come into work late. If you've got someone who is okay with yelling at people on the phone, you're more likely to see their people operate the same way when they're under pressure. So it's just really, we just need to be really aware of the role we need our leaders to play, so that we can set expectations and we can make sure that they're showing up in a way that's going to support the change and not derail us. Then lastly, we have our risk and resistance management. Now, I know the last thing you're going to feel like doing at the beginning of a shiny new change is to think about everything that might go wrong. But I beg of you, please do, because it is insanely therapeutic. First of all, it means that you're getting it all out of your head, all on a page. And then once you've got it there, you can start looking at, how you're going to work to either mitigate the risk of mitigate the risk actually happening, reduce the chances, or some risks are just inherent, right? We can't actually reduce the chances of them happening, but we need to make sure that we've got them up there, on the board, so that we can then at least have a bit of an action plan as to how we're going to solve for those risks if they come up. When you are managing change, you are like, when you're in the thick of it, right? It becomes very busy and it's very reactive. So you have a chance here to be proactive in how you go about solving these challenges. I've always got a list of the things that, that might go wrong. And then that way, when they do eventuate, I don't have to use my precious headspace, my time and my energy trying to work out, how I'm going to deal with something, because it's already done for me. Okay. It's already there. It's already laid out. So that is a very brief overview of the change journey and change execution framework. In a moment, we're going to come back around and I'm going to dive into some very specific activities that we can do at each of these phases. But before we do, I wanted to just cover off on the roles of an effective leader, because we've sort of said they have this super important role to play. So let's make sure that we can actually talk about what that looks like. So Clark is a ProSci model. We have a different one that we use internally at Xero, but it's all the same sort of stuff. The reason I like this model is that it is very readily available to you on the ProSci website. So when we talk about the roles, so Clark stands for communicator, liaison, advocate, resistance manager, and coach. So what we need from our leaders is, first of all, we need them to be communicators. I need my leaders to be able to support people in understanding what the change means for them, why it's important, how it's going to work, what's actually happening, that kind of stuff. Liaison, that is a role which becomes even more critical the larger the implementation gets. But if you've got a delivery team or a project team or just a couple of people working on it, and they're sort of not sitting amongst the people who are consuming the change, it's really important that the managers or leaders, people of influence, are able to act as the bridge between the project team and the team who are consuming the change. Not all resistance is bad. Sometimes resistance tells you that you haven't done enough in a change, okay? And we need to be feeding that back to the project team so that they can improve. Advocate for the change. Now, this is not just about, this is both words, but also actions. It's not enough to be really positive. I mean, I will love that if you can be really positive as a manager about your change. I think that's really important. But it's also about it's the body language. It's not rolling your eyes and all that sort of stuff. And then it's also things like, if we're saying that the change is really important, it's big change for our practice, super important that everyone gets involved. Training is going to be on Tuesday, and then everyone goes to training, but then the leader's like, oh, I don't need to go because I don't know, I'm not using the software, it doesn't impact me, I've got a client meeting or whatever. You are unconsciously saying to your people that this change is just like not that important. You're not deliberately doing it, you're not deliberately undoing the change, but the messages, the unconscious messages that we are sending can have that impact. So we just need to be really aware of that. Resistance manager, just need you to pick up resistance early. Resistance could look passive, it can look active. So it's just understanding that we need to make sure that we're bringing everyone on the journey, and then coaching as well. So if people are challenged by the change, it might, they're really frustrated by something that's going on. Coaching is all about, asking lots of questions rather than sort of saying to the person, just buck up, mate, we're going to do this, like you've got no choice. Get curious, understand what's going wrong for that person, and then support them in finding the answers that they need. Resistance looks quite emotional a lot of the time when we start seeing active resistance, like that sort of that loud resistance. And when you boil it down, it might be just a couple of things that are sort of adding up. So we just need to be a bit proactive. The other important role that comes with change is your change champions. Now, we've just covered the Clark model for our leaders. It's quite similar for our change champions. However, change champions aren't always operating with the same level of formal influence that you will see your leaders operate with. So, for example, formal influence, just let those go. So, legitimate is your business owners, for example, directors, partners, etc. Reward are those people within the practice who have been empowered with the ability to negatively impact or positively impact people. So, for example, so with your reward, it's people who can, I don't know, maybe it's like a manager who's able to put you forward for a bonus. And then coercive is the opposite of that, right? It's someone who's able to give you, I don't know, a warning for, I don't know, doing something wrong. So they're really obvious, right? You can see them within a business. The ones that you can't see though, which are fascinating, are the informal ones. And there's something that you need to be really aware of when you're managing change, because these people can either be your absolute superstars, they're going to drive the change for you, but equally they can also be your blockers as well. So it's just really important that you're just aware of it and how it might play into the change. So the three are expert, referent, and informational. So your experts are people who are just, they gain power and influence from understanding a area, and people trust them in that space. So it might be self-managed super funds. You know, there was always a couple of go-to people when I was in practice that you would just go and ask all your questions to, or it might be a particular software. They know a lot about a particular area, and you need to be aware of them, because if you're about to go and change, say, an area that impacts them, people's self-worth is very tightly bound to their ability to show up and do their jobs well. Okay, so if you're starting to mess with that, you need to understand what you're taking away from them when you ask them to change. So bring them on the change early if you can. Our change champions, we need to make sure they've got a really positive attitude, they're problem solvers, they've got like a real desire for learning and development. They're sort of the people that we want on board, and we're just hoping that our experts sort of align with those people as well. Referent, they're just your people who are really liked, quite charismatic within the practice, and so people look to them. And then informational, these are your people who potentially can access information that other people can't. So a typical example is a practice manager who can pull reports which no one else in the practice has access to. So just being aware of how these people might feed into your change, just being aware of them is really important. And I should mention also, this is an adaptation of French and Raven's Sources of Power. It's a really old model, but it works. I enjoy it. Okay, so circling back around, we are going to firstly look at mentally preparing for change. So the way that we, as I sort of mentioned earlier, the way that we do this is through really good communication and driving that engagement. Now, for change to be effective, we need to make sure that that we're getting the messaging right, so that it is compelling on a much deeper level. So to start us off, I'm just going to ask you this very simple question, and it is, do people hate change? Because I hear this a lot, my people hate change. The reality is people do not hate change, okay? People will buy houses, they'll get married, they'll have children, they'll change jobs, you know, arguably some of the biggest changes that a person can make in their life. Now, the difference lies here in the perceived value. When people make these big changes, they're really clear on why they're changing. They have a compelling reason to buck the status quo. Now, a comment that I often get, which hurts my heart, but not for the reasons that you would think it would, is that I don't need to get my people on board. I don't care about messaging because my people have to do what I tell them to do. And that hurts my heart, not because I'm a nice person, but because I know that when you tell your staff that they have to do something and you don't bring them on the journey, you are getting bare minimum from them. You are getting them rocking up at 9 a.m, they are leaving just before 5, you're getting 70% productivity at best, they're doing what they need to do to not get fired. When you bring them on the journey, however, and they're passionate and they see the value in what you're doing, you will get 110% of them. They might be still rocking up at 9, but they're not leaving at 5. They're probably leaving a lot later, and they're working hard and they're doing it with a great attitude. They're going to absolutely, they love it. And speaking from experience, my first meeting was at 4 a.m. yesterday. No one is asking me to get up that early, but I really believe in the work that I'm doing, so I don't mind doing that, right? So, and I see that in a lot of people that I work with. Okay, so when it comes to messaging the change, I am going to, well, first of all, when you announce that there is a change, there's going to be, or you're going to be met with a lot of questions. So people are going to be wanting to know, Why do we need to change? How are we going to change? What's changing? So the challenge that you have is thinking about how are you going to organize your thoughts and motivations behind the change you're delivering so that it inspires people to want to come on the journey with us. Okay, so first impressions count. We need to make sure we are clear, we are considered, because this is going to shape the trust that our people have for this implementation, or whatever the change is. It doesn't have to be, usually we're talking technology, but it might be about something completely unrelated to technology as well. Change is change. So when we are designing our change messaging, we start firstly with why we're changing. We then look at how we're going to change. And lastly, we finish with what is changing. So I'm going to give you a quick example. It's probably not as quick as I want. I just need to just get my notes up. I'm going to have to read it. Sorry, it's not going to look so professional. But essentially, I want you to imagine that you are my people. I am the director, partner of the practice, and I am announcing a change, just so you can get an understanding of what this is going to kind of look like. So starting, I'll move back, we'll do it correctly. So we're going to start with why. You all work incredibly hard, and it's clear that many of you are feeling stretched. We know we need to find smarter ways to both increase and manage our capacity, not simply ask more of you. We recognise also that to continue to attract both clients and great staff, we need to position ourselves as a tech-forward firm, one that embraces modern, secure cloud systems and continually invests in relevant, up-to-date technology. This isn't just about perception, it's about giving our team the right tools to be successful. Right now, we're held back. Our systems are siloed, we're double handling data, invoicing is still manual, and the industry is seeing an increase in cybersecurity risks. The reality is, while our current setup has served us well over the years, it's now limiting our growth and placing too much pressure on our people. So what are we going to do to solve for this? Well, we formed a dedicated working group to explore solutions that addressed our challenges. And through our work, we discovered that the solution lay in adopting the right digital technology. As part of this, it was decided a new practice management solution would need to be implemented. And after carefully reviewing multiple software options, the team identified Xero Practice Manager as the best fit to meet our needs and drive the change we require. So what are we doing? Well, in June, we'll be implementing Xero Practice Manager to streamline our operations and support our growth. On July 1st, a bit past it now, but maybe it's next year. On July 1st, we will begin to use Xero Practice Manager to reduce manual admin and automate invoicing, increase security, and improve workflow efficiency. Once this change is embedded, it will free up time for everyone to focus on delivering great value to clients and allow partners to dedicate more time to strategic growth. Now, when you're announcing this to your people, you of course will not do what I just did then and read it off a page. You are going to embody the communication. You are going to feel it in every fiber of your being, and you're going to deliver it with passion. So in terms of how we plan to communicate, we first get clear on our key messaging, which we now are. You then design your briefing session and FAQs. So that messaging was quite brief. It's usually a bit longer than that as you're figuring out all the reasons why you're moving. FAQs are a great way, just, think about if you can put yourself in everybody's shoes around the practice, what are the questions they're going to have? What's going to motivate them? Try and get it into an FAQ, and then your leaders, you're all singing from the same song sheet. You've got that consistent messaging. When I design my briefings, which is my announcement to let people know that there's going to be a change, or a formal announcement, there's usually whispers everywhere, I will have my messaging. If we're talking tech, I will then bring in a demo of the tech so people can see what the future state looks like. And then FAQs I might just send out in an email. I also split my briefings into two. So internally at Xero, our people will never find out at the same time as our leaders. Remembering people need to mentally prepare for the the change, and leaders are people. They need to mentally prepare for the change. They're going to have reactions themselves. So let's give them the space to understand what the change is going to mean for them, so that they can then show up the way we need them to for their people. During the leaders briefing as well, I'll then touch on the sorts of roles that I need them to play. So sort of thinking back to Clark and making sure they understand the importance of their role in change, because I think a lot of the time they don't realize, it's not, delivering change is not something that's part of their BAU. Okay, I'm trying to zoom through this. So we've got our communication. So we're mentally prepared for the change now. In our next phase, physically preparing for the change. Education is going to be specific to the change that you're working on. So I thought here I might just look at how people learn in the workplace so that you can design the best training possible when you are doing an implementation. So the 70-20-10 learning model is a learning model for how adults learn in the workplace. It essentially says that 70% of your learning is done, it's done on the job, right? So it's people actually getting in, completing challenging tasks, problem solving, reflecting, all that great stuff. 20% is then done socially. So it's learning with others. It's collaborating with colleagues. It's improving together. It's receiving and giving feedback. And then lastly, we have the formal piece. So it's always a bit sad to see how small it is, but it is what it is. Essentially, formal courses, training, seminars, what you're seeing here today is only worth 10% of your overall learning. And then of that 10% formal learning, how much do we actually retain? So during this session or during a training session, I'm going to be very generous and say, people remember 100%. But after they leave, after an hour, you're down to 50. After a day, you are likely to have retained 25%. And after a week, my friends, you are lucky to retain 10%. So if you do a training on the Thursday and then you're not using the software till the following Wednesday, you're lucky to have 1% left of what you need to know to be able to use whatever the new technology is. So we need to be really careful about how we design it, first of all. So thinking back to the 70-20-10 learning model, can we bring in more practical and social ways into our training? And then when we do the training as well, so making sure that we're not doing the training that far in advance and we're doing it just before we jump into the new software. These are my 3 favorite tips in terms of how adults learn. So, and this is where leaders can play a really critical role in supporting their people get the most out of their training. It's the greatest return on your investment in terms of giving up an hour of your day in a training session. So first of all, ask questions and encourage others to do the same. So champions, leaders, the more you ask questions, it not only shows that you are engaged, the act of asking a question, it engages the higher learning centers of our brains, which means it is easier it's not even easier, it just makes understanding and retention so much more powerful. We also need you to take action quickly post-training. So we've just looked at how much we forget when it comes to our learning. So it's really important that we stop seeing training as just this 1 hour thing that we do and then we go back to our BAS, okay, after the training. Leaders have a really important role here to play where they can get proactively prepared. They know what's coming in the training. How are we going to get the most out of it? Let's make sure we've got a client that we are all going to jump into after the training to actually embed that learning. Okay, so if we can jump in, we can do it straight away. We're practicing so that we're not going to forget. And then lastly, repeat. So if you can get in and you can have a number of clients and you can embed that learning early on, it's going to be long lasting. So you have billions of neurons in your brain, so our brain cells. And when you learn something new, they form a connection. It's really cool. It's like yeah, anyway, it is what it is. So they form a connection. The more you repeat something, the stronger that connection gets. Okay, so we need to be repeating as much as we can up front to get that learning and habit, or the new habits that we're trying to form, get them embedded. So that is how we can get more out of our education and enablement. How am I going for time? Not particularly well, but we'll press on. So with our physically experiencing the change piece, there are a number of elements here that you can do, which I very often see skipped, that will enable you to will enable people to do the right thing, but also sort of ensure that they can't actually do the wrong thing either. So when we talk about reinforcing the change, I'm going to start off with my leaders and champions here. So we're obviously trying to set the right tone for adoption. So we need our leaders to be doing the right thing, working in the new way. We've talked about Clark. We need them to be advocating and communicating what the right thing is. So they've got this really important part to play. One thing that I do see, so it's just more of a, yeah, don't do this, is champions will often be sort of other accountants. They don't have formal influence, but they'll have, informal influence. So accountants and bookkeepers, and they might have KPIs that are put on them. Now, let's say, for example, you need to have a 85% productivity. I see this quite a lot. And so they've been asked to be champions, but they also have this 85% productivity requirement. The challenge that we have, right, is that we are now disincentivizing our champions to do the one thing that we want to do, which is help people. I want my champions to be out there supporting their colleagues, helping them to find the answers to problems and, doing all the right stuff. And if I'm still saying, hey, why aren't you hitting your 85% productivity requirement? That's a little bit, it's a bit unfair. So we need to make sure that we're incentivizing the right kind of behavior. And that's not just for champions, that is for people that are learning as well. So if you've got, if you're saying, oh, we know that it's going to take time for you to learn this new software and it's, it's going to be challenging, all that sort of stuff. And then you're holding the weekly WIP meeting and putting a lot of emphasis on how much is on the WIP. You're saying one thing, but your behavior and actions, your routine is saying something very different. So just make sure that you're aligned. Recognition and reward. So we want to be rewarding people, celebrating people for doing the right stuff. If they've gone out and they've solved a problem, let's recognize it, let's put it up in lights, kind of thing. Just acknowledging that someone has done well or has done something that's a bit above and beyond. It's a really nice piece, I think, to bring in. Limit old tools. Where you can, please turn the old dang thing off, because it just means that people can go back to the old system, and it is so much easier to use the old system than the new system, so why wouldn't they? In a number of situations, it's, you actually can't turn the old tools off. There might be some specific scenarios that you need to use those tools for. And in those situations, we need to make sure that we have very specific rules in place and we set those expectations up front. So when you're training staff, you're actually letting them know what is okay behavior and what is not. So for example, look, an easy one for me is report templates. So reporting in Xero. So let's just say you've implemented Xero, you've got the ledgers, you're setting them up and you're running report templates over the top of them. And then you've got the old system somewhere in the background. Now, I make sure we are explicit up front that the only reasons you will ever use the old system is it is the last year that we are preparing this client. We will not be preparing them again. They might have the client might have folded, or they might be moving on, or other reasons. And so in that situation, sure, do it in the old system because there's no point migrating them across. The other reason is if, they're working on the client today and we don't want to start them off in there's no point halfway through a job moving them to the new system. So they're already working on the job, finish it in the old system. But that's it. So we're really clear up front about the rules, and then we make sure that it is fully embedded. Oh, it's not coming up. Fully embedded in their workflows. Okay, so with the when it comes to embedding in workflows, this is about looking through, and we do this at the beginning of change. Go through all your checklists, have a look at your existing processes. Let's update them to reflect the new normal. So process mapping is a hugely powerful tool, and a lot of practices will have checklists done up. So if you are wanting people to use a new system, call it out in the checklist. Put those visual cues in there. And then when it comes to elements like review, letting staff know that, for example, if it hasn't been done, if the job hasn't been prepared in the right place, it's the manager's role to send that back to the staff member, or the reviewer's role to send it back to the staff member to say, hey, this client actually didn't meet these couple of exceptions. It should have been done in this new way, and it hasn't been done. And I know that's really sucky. You might not have deliberately done it, but these are the rules, kind of thing. So where we know people are going to try and default back, we wrap process and structure, expectations embedded all in the workflow, so that people don't have any choice but to do the right thing. And it is a challenge up front. When people first start learning, it's not the easiest thing, but the more we do this, the easier it's going to get for people faster, which means that that discomfort is obviously it's shortened as well. So it's always uncomfortable up front, but by using these reinforcement mechanisms, people are going to have a great time of it. And so that is me wrapped up. So we've just had a look at the critical roles of the leaders. So please make sure you remember Clark. Understanding formal and informal influence. We looked at key messaging, so Simon Sinek's golden circle, and considering how adults learn when designing and consuming training, also when we book that in. And then lastly, we've lightly touched on some implementation controls. So simple and very practical ways, I hope, that's going to support you through change to make the technology stick. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sarah. A great presentation and lots to think about when it comes to change, especially within practice. We do have just a little bit of time for questions. If anyone has any questions, please pop them through the Q&A and we'll get to those. Before that, I do just want to remind everyone that Xero is a platinum sponsor at this year's RegTech event. So they'll have a stand in Brisbane, Gold Coast, Sydney, Adelaide, Perth, Hobart, and Melbourne. I am just going to run a quick poll. So if you are interested in registering for our in-person event, just click your preferred location in the poll and our team can sign you up directly. There's also a QR code on the screen. If you have your phones handy and you want to scan the QR code, you can book your own ticket in. Okay, so I will just take a look here for any questions that we've got. Please pop them through.
Cool. I've got a question that's come through. What is the most challenging thing that when it comes to change? It's a good question. In my line of work, I'm going to say the most challenging piece is it's probably not the change itself, it's the context within which the change is happening. So it's other things that are going on outside of the change. So for example, you might be implementing BGL or you might be implementing Xero. And I think sometimes we can get really focused on what that change looks like. But when you're operating change, you need to be really aware of the context within which the change is happening. So, things like culture are going to impact. Other changes are a really big one as well. People only have a certain level of capacity for change. And so if you've got, this is something we have to be so aware of at Xero, because there's changes happening all the time. We need to make sure that we're not dumping them all on people at the same time, that we're giving people the space to be able to consume each one. And so timing is really important there. So I'd say that's probably the biggest challenge is that piece.
Thanks for that, Sarah. I guess this session, there's just so much to think about. So what we can do is we can let people go away and have some thoughts. And if any questions pop up, you can reach out to the Xero team or us at BGL. As I did say, they'll be at RegTech, so go and visit their stand and ask the team any questions that you may have. Once again, Sarah, I do just want to say thank you so much for your presentation and your time. And to everybody else online, thank you for joining us, and I hope everyone has a good day.